You know, after a long, hard day of fighting and conquering and destroying and maiming, I've come to reflect upon my career that I only fight things that have got a pulse, living things, you know. Trees, not worth fighting. They don't fight back very well. I mean, there's some weird ones that the druids particularly like. But I don't fight trees as a general rule. I don't fight the dead. They just sort of lie there most of the time. Don't fight them either. Don't fight the air. Don't fight the sea. Done that once. That was a failure. Got rusty armour more than anything else. No, it's important to realise that when you're going to fight something, you should know what you're fighting. Because if you don't know what you're fighting, then it's awfully exciting and dramatic, and people can't metagame because they don't know what the hell's going on. And as a result, you end up with a more enjoyable experience. So, I try and avoid that as much as possible. Yeah. Alright, what's your question? No, you may not. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Campaign Creator Series. Today we're going to be creating another monster, and this one is to support the map that we made last week of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, or that other city that no one remembers. This is the Foliraptor. It's a smart pistol, especially when hunting others in parks. If you get that reference, leave the comment down below. So, the Foliraptor. What does it need to do? Now, these are stock standard questions. We're going to work our way through these all the time. The Foliraptor, in my thinking, is a plant-based hunter. Very similar, obviously, to velociraptors or Deinonychus, depending on however you want to pronounce it, or Utahraptors, or any of the raptors from the dinosaur period. A Foliraptor is basically a floral version or a foliage version of those. I think it could be absolutely terrifying. You know, we've got strangler vines and we've got Venus flytraps. What if Venus flytraps were mobile and could hunt in packs? And instead of just, I mean, this could still be how the creature kills its prey, although I do like the idea of these raptors launching onto the enemy, clawing with these big thorns instead of claws. These big thorns rake into the flesh, whilst the head of the raptor is busy ripping into the beast, and the thorns are going to inject stuff. We're getting ahead of ourselves anyway. So what does it need to do? It needs to hunt in packs in the jungle of the Gardens of Babylon. It needs to do that. Now, when I was in the podcast Dungeons of Diabolical Design, which you can now get from our website, as a matter of fact, it's now free for anyone to listen to. If you want to hear it early, 3 months earlier, as a matter of fact, you can join our Patreon to get access to that, but it is also on our website. In that, I was discussing with Dimitris, one of the founders and creators of World Anvil. We were busy designing a dungeon, and we kind of had a hanging garden of Babylon effect. And there we needed anti-air plants. We needed plants that would take out flying things. Foliraptors were not really mentioned, I don't think. But I think that could be quite cool. So what does it need to do? It needs to hunt in packs. It needs to terrorize the hell out of our player characters. That's ultimately the reason why we would want to include them in the first place. So that's what we're going to do with our Foliraptors. How common are they? It depends on how powerful we want to make them. So if we want them to be truly terrifying, we make them quite powerful. But if we want them to be more of something that is, oh crikey, here comes a pack of them, there's 10 of them, run away. I mean, we could certainly do that. And we could expand it further. The Foliraptor is the little one, and then we have perhaps the Tyrannosaurus leaf. No, Tyrannosaurus branch, Tyrannosaurus tree. Ochosaurus, whatever. We could then have a bigger predator if we really, really wanted to, but we don't necessarily need that. I think the Foliraptors will be terrifying enough with some Venus flytraps and some, the myconoids that are the little fungi people. They could ride them as mounts into battle. That could be quite fun too. So yeah, we've got a whole bunch of uses for them, and I don't think there's anything particularly that comes to mind that satisfies our requirement for what the Foliraptor needs to do, which is to be able to look like a plant. That's what plants look like. And then skulk out and attack. I'm kind of thinking the alien monster meets a velociraptor as a salad. I think that's really where it needs to be. So where does it come from? They could be born in pods. That could be quite cool. The characters find these Venus flytrap-like pods that have not opened, but that have been eaten through. Oh, be-da-dee-da. So they've been eaten through by the thing inside of them, and that's, of course, the Foliraptor that sets them up. That could be really, really exciting, really, really, really fun to do. So that's where they come from. Let's take it a little bit further. What do we need to understand about all of this kind of stuff? If we do not adapt, we die. It's a simple rule, and one that has been proven time and time again. Adaptability, or change, is often very, very scary for a lot of people. We find that if we don't change, things will change around us, and suddenly we become obsolete. We have to make sure that we always remain in a constant state of development and awareness about what is going on around us, and that we adjust accordingly. And yes, I'm talking to you, who still plays 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons. The ecology, the environment that they dwell in. They live in these cultured gardens. Arguably, they were bred by the inhabitants as a defense, as a security measure. Or perhaps they were curiosities and they've been kept in a caged area, and that cage is now broken open. It does depend on the type of adventure that you want to put them in, but once you have added them to your campaign, and I think this is the important thing to remember, is that once you have added them to your campaign, you need to be able to use them later on. So don't make them too specific to the environment unless you do have monster creation as a craft that players can take and, put a bone, put a flesh, put it together and you make a new species. You do need to have them occurring naturally. They need to have got there somehow. So the ecology is that they live in a fairly dense foliage type space and they hunt in packs. Why do they survive? What do they feast on? Well, I think if they're designed to hunt down predators like jaguars or tigers or other jungle dwelling kind of predators, that could be pretty cool. So they hunt the predators. What hunts them? What survives off of them? I mean, what would survive off of them? I think we've got some options. We could have ants. There are some horrific ants out there that do some crazy things. It could be fungus. Now, there is a fungus that makes zombie animals. Unfortunately, my brain has gone blank on it, but I know that there are certain fungus that infects ants and causes them to do certain things so that the fungal colony grows at the expense of the ants. It turns them into sort of like zombie ants. Perhaps that's what feeds on these beasts, is this fungus. It grows on them, slowly driving them mad until eventually it consumes them and they collapse in this gigantic, very fertile pile of compost, which the fungi can then, grow on and that sort of thing. And then a little cephalopod, some sort of little bug or something comes and eats the fungus, and that's the great cycle that they go through. So where do they fit on the food chain? Well, they're at the top. I don't think anything necessarily hunts them. The fungus is that they brush past a bush that's got the fungus on it and then they become infected and go mad. So they are an apex predator unless we want to have something bigger. I would say as a pack, they're an apex predator. Individually, they're not so strong. So what that does is that inspires us to change our approach to designing these creatures to give them some kind of pack ability. Now, there are a couple monsters that have got pack abilities. And those pack abilities require them to be very, very savage in terms of choosing a single target. Now, when we are designing adventures and combat scenarios for our characters, sometimes we will tend to have, oh, there's a monster for him, and there's a monster for him, and there's a monster for her, and she needs a monster, and she doesn't get a monster because they only got 4 of them. That is not necessarily the right way to go. And especially with the Foliraptors, as we are designing them, we will need the Foliraptors to choose a target that looks the weakest. To choose a target that looks the weakest and then to launch their attack. So that is the tactic that they're going to have, and we're going to want them to have some kind of ability that allows them to do this as well. And that, I think, can be quite fun to try and come up with. So again, though, there is a caution here. Well, yes, obviously it can have missiles attached to it, but is that really what you want? Is that ultimately? Yes, it is. Of course it is what you want. Naturally, that's you always bigger, better, stronger, faster, more powers, more attributes, more statistics. Yes. Make sure that your imaginary numbers are that much bigger than the imaginary numbers of everybody else, so that your imaginary numbers are more impressive. Are you compensating for something? I suspect you might very well be. Rein it back, bring it back, make it small, make it subtle. That will also work just as well. So sort of little missiles rather than the whole thing being a missile. What? Precisely. Who is he? I don't know. Anyway, so we need to give them some values, some powers, and possibly some magic if they need it. Now, the values of these creatures, we've already established that they are together strong, individually not so strong. What level do we set them at? What difficulty do we set them at? And can these things grow bigger? I think that they can grow bigger if they avoid the fungus, and then they can evolve into something even more terrifying. Because sequels, right? The idea is that they start off as fairly weakish creatures, so we could have perhaps a party at an average combat level, a starting out party, take on 3 or 4 of these and perhaps triumph. As we go up in level, the packs get bigger and their attacks will not necessarily get worse, it's just that their combined power will get stronger, and then they evolve into these bigger beasts which then can fight high level parties. Their powers, again, I think that there are 2 major powers that we need to focus on in terms of these Foliraptors. One of them is camouflage. They need to be able to look like plants and detect like plants. Is it a magical ability, or is it just that they have these very leafy, they look like, kind of those stick insects or the geckos that have got weird skin bits and pieces? Do we want them to be able to change colour? I don't know of many plants that change colour quickly. I know plants that open in the sunlight and close in the sunlight, but not that change quickly. And it's another reason why they have to eat flesh, by the way. If you look at the Venus flytrap and that sort of thing, they don't move around, so they only need an ant every now and again. Foliraptors are active, they need lots of energy, so that's why they're going to be hunting things. So I would say their powers are camouflage and a pack ability, some kind of pack thing which will allow them to hunt and to move quite quickly. And then a third one, which makes them very dangerous if not dealt with properly, is I would have that their sap allows them to regenerate. Maybe slowly, maybe if they remain rooted in one spot, if they sort of just stop and don't move and kind of go into a hibernative state, then they can photosynthesize and regenerate. Because for me, that's the whole point of calling it a Foliraptor and not just designing a Velociraptor. So that's something interesting. Do they have magic? Is there a magical thing about them? I don't think so. It certainly could be, and if you sort of cast your mind around, you could say that maybe they could cast some kind of fungal spore, but we want the fungus to feed on them, not to be subservient to them. So I would say no magical powers. This is what it is. So, well, let's go to the final step. And the final step is just going to help you cement this creature into existence. Sometimes myths are created around these amazing performers and things, and sometimes we have to make our own and sort of slip them under the door for others to read. The important thing is Chaos Kampf. Where did it all come from? What started it? That original primordial extravaganza of chaos. We need to have a starting point so that our legend can be told by those who can witness its birth and see its journey. And that is ultimately what we want, is to have a starting point that sparks imagination. So, the myth and or legends that surround these beasts. I think in this particular tower we would want to give that type of information to our players, especially if this is the first time that they're encountering it. A lot of players will have read the Monsters Manual through the course of their histories, and so will have a broad idea of what's in there. When they come across new monsters, it's always fun, but if you've hinted at it, well, that's even better. So perhaps just outside of this grand temple, there are carvings on the walls which hint at plants that sort of look like raptors, but sort of look like plants eating men and beasts. You could do something along those lines to give them a forewarning and a foreshadowing. Is there a legend about the first plants that fought back? There very well could be, and instead of having the hanging gardens being just a beautiful display for a loved one, or a wife in this particular case, perhaps it's more of a containment for these beasts, or it is honouring these beasts, because we have to till the land around, and so we had to clear forest, but we have built a forest for you out of respect. That could also be interesting. Again, it depends on the angle in which you want to take your adventure and how mysterious you want to make them. What is their role within society? But we've kind of already handled that in terms of talking about them as these predatory beasts that the villagers recognize, or the city recognizes as a threat, but are now paying respect to. Their origin story, perhaps it was a tree or a plant of some particular nature that was distressed by the incursion of forest cutting peoples, and so gave birth to this to try and protect themselves. Perhaps it was just a weird quirk of evolution. Maybe it was the goddess of nature creating watchdogs that could look out for the plants, because nobody does. There's some interesting options there, and again, feel free to explore them. If your players are particularly inquisitive and they're likely to go, plant-eating people, I go to the library and research, then I would strongly suggest that this page is for you. Spend just 10 minutes writing down 10 sentences, use World Anvil to keep your notes in it, just put it all together and have it handy. It really does help in terms of players who ask questions. And what treasure would they have? What treasure would a plant have? A plant wouldn't collect gold. It wouldn't collect gemstones, I don't think. It would take in everything. It would eat everything. It's a plant. It doesn't have any, I would imagine, it doesn't have any discernment. It then has these stones and trinkets and bits and pieces in its gut, which is designed to dissolve and then absorb the nutrients from the corpses that it eats. So perhaps it would dissolve metal, perhaps it would dissolve non-magical items, but the items that remain in its gut, I think, would actually stay there. So a lot of animals, ostriches today, dinosaurs in the past, would swallow stones which would help grind the food within their bodies. Perhaps these swallow river stones, which over time get eaten away by the acid. But in the belly is a whole collection of gems and certain minerals and things that have survived this digestion. And perhaps the gold itself has actually melted, gold and silver and copper and the like, but it has not passed out of the beast. It doesn't have that kind of canal. It simply absorbs the nutrients. Venus flytraps don't have that type of duct. It doesn't exist. They don't need it. So the stomach slowly gets lined with these coins that won't, with the liquid coins, which over time will get heavier and heavier until eventually the beast is unable to hunt and will eventually die as a result. So we could certainly go that route. You find the corpse, a distended, bloated stomach, and you cut it open and this liquid gold, silver and platinum pours out of the stomach onto the ground, but inside are gemstones that were unable to be dissolved. It's a very interesting story if you ask me. Well, why not? Why not do something like that? I think that could be a lot of fun. So that's the Foliraptor in brief-ish, kinda, for this channel anyway. That's the Foliraptor. What do you think about this plant-based predator? Is it something that you might consider adding to your game or not? Now, I wanted to give you some feedback. What kind of entrenched this was that last month my Patreons got given this. And the blue is keying out, unfortunately, so if I can sort of get rid of that key. So this is an illustration done by my partner of a glass dragon, and we then turned it into a homebrew. So it's got everything. It's got a write-up about the creature. It's got the stat blocks that you would expect, or maybe not expect. And then on the very back is an adventure that incorporates this entire thing. So we're waiting for feedback from people, but everyone seems so far to have liked it. We'll do the same with the Foliraptor, and you'll be able to find that on my Patreon, patreon.com/greatgamemaster. You can find us there and support the channel, making sure that, well, we continue to do what we do, and you get some cool stuff out of that as well. Until next time, however, a big shout out to our sponsors, World Anvil. Thank you for sponsoring today's show. Go and have a look at their website, worldanvil.com. Use the code GREATGM and you'll get a discount on a yearly subscription with them. Until next time, however, I wish you and yours the very happiest of foliage creation.
I get it. I totally get it. I understand that I am at the very bottom of the food chain. And when one of these little buggers or one of those Foliraptor thingies, you know, I've got to clean up, haven't I? I mean, I've got to go in there and say, all right, well, that's very good. Oh, you got the leg off of that adventurer and you left the rest behind because you're an overfed, understuffed chicken. You know, it's me who's got to sort it out. And quite frankly, I'm sick of being gummed on by their little budding, you know, Foliraptor babies. I mean, they sort of wrap around your leg and they maul on it for a little bit. But, you know, there's got to be a better way. I mean, can't we all just, maybe when adventures arrive, we just give them a deck of cards and we say, choose a card. And on most of the cards, it's like death. And then on some of them, it's like treasure. And then they get the treasure card and say, yeah, well done, you. And then we can take them on a tour of the gardens and I can chain up those raptors without a problem. I mean, they're not particularly smart. I mean, some of them are quite smart. And, well, if you've watched this far to the end of the video, the reference right at the beginning, of course, came from Jurassic Park. But you knew that already, didn't you?